皆さんこんにちは、ケニーです。マイローリングストーンニュースのトピックスをご視聴いただきありがとうございます。この動画では日本には届いていない英語の記事を読んで最先端のアメリカのトレンドやカルチャー、そしてアートや時事ネタなど様々な面白いトピックスを紹介していきます。ニューヨークタイムズやロイターなどの有料コンテンツもフリーで紹介していますので、英語のリスニング力や会話力を向上させながらたくさんの情報を得ていただき、少しでも皆様のお役に立ったら嬉しいです。動画内で難しい単語やイディオムもたくさん出てきますが、皆さんはこの10分15分の動画を見ていただくだけで最新のカルチャーやニュースを知ることができますので、通勤通学のお供にぜひ最後までご覧ください。また聞きなじみのない英単語には動画内でフィーチャーしていますし、日本語の翻訳文は概要欄に掲載しておりますので、まずは英語でご覧いただき、その答え合わせとして翻訳文をお使いください。それではここから英語でスタートです。 Remembering the Archies, a fake band ahead of its time. In an utterly accidental way, a box set devoted to the Archies, the infamous TV cartoon band of the 60s, couldn't have arrived at the timeline moment.In the winter of 2021, we lost the Monkees' Michael Nesmith. He was a band musical gatekeeper, the one most preoccupied with the TV-generated combo being allowed to write its own songs and play on its own records. Michael Nesmith famously rejected Sugar Sugar, a bubblegum pop song as basic as it gets, brought to them by producer Don Kirshner.As the late Kashna told Rolling Stone magazine in 2009, Nesmith's dismissing of the song inspired him to turn to animation. Mike said, "It's a piece of junk. I'm not doing it." But I came home and my son Ricky was reading Archie comic books. Inspired by the site, Kirshner flashed on turning the comic into a cartoon series, and having Archie, Jughead, Veronica,and the gang performed the songs, instead of actual three-dimensional humans with opinions. That's all because the Monkees wouldn't do my song and that got me pissed off. Kirshner knew a hit when he heard it in 1969. Sugar Sugar wound up knocking the Rolling Stone Honky Tonk Women out of the #1 spot, where it stayed for 4 weeks, and also became the biggest selling hit of the year.The cartoon series, which launched in 1698, had its dopey charms, but all of the 60s artifacts to survive and prosper 5 decades on, it's doubtful that anyone, even Kirshner, would have predicted the Archies would make the list. The series is hardly remembered as a high-water mark of animation, and neither are the 5 Archies albums built to the cartoon characters but sung and played by uncredited studio players, recorded as anything for forgettable cash-in product for a Saturday morning cartoon show. And yet, the Archies continue being reanimated. Riverdale, the self-consciously somber update of Archie, revives the Archies as a band, albeit as a predictably gloomier one playing Dawa pop like Midnight Radio. And let's not forget the way the Gorillaz inherited the cartoon band legacy decades later, or that Bored Ape Yacht Club, those cartoon monkeys that are the talk of the NFT world, are venturing into music.The naysayers of the time, like the emerging rock press that dismissed the Archies records as disposable junk, weren't completely wrong. Throughout the 5 discs, there aren't too many other tracks to rival the undeniable hook, and pour a little sugar on it, which is great of Sugar Sugar. And the first 2 Archies albums pretty much delivered on the promise. There are songs like the bouncy Time to Love,For Raw is a common grade school preteens, and Hatsak is an interesting ode to food without doubt. These songs are still shining bright with hooks even now. You will also enjoy Across Hello Look Like a Truck Driver. Narrator tried to hitch a ride in order to find a missing girlfriend. And a song which mildly nerdy, Hide and Seek, which has such a funky guitar lick and backbeat. starting with the title Sugar and Spice from their third album 1969's Jingle Jangle. Wanted very much to be Sugar Sugar, although it couldn't replicate the song's Fiji highs. Jingle Jangle is what one could call the Archies' traditional third album since they stomp a little bit harder. Track 7 Get on the Line and deep into Motown grooves. Track 3 She's Putting Me Through Changes. You can hear the Archies, or at least the living humans behind the animation, aiming to grow as artists even if novelties like Track 10 Senorita Rita still hobble them. Like many of their peers animated freshly, Team Archie wanted to be taken seriously. Sunshine, their first album from 1970, trying to be as relevant as possible, which meant the dose of the Turkish ego-pop. The lyrics of Summer Prayer for Peace mostly amounts of rattling off the population numbers of major cities and countries, including North Vietnam. In Sunshine, the sheets were planted for later, maturity-minded records like the Jonas Brothers, Lines, Vines, and Trying Times. Not surprisingly, Sunshine couldn't archive weak sales. At their Archies farewell, 1971's This Is Love returned to bubblegum pop basic, only revealing a few nods at musical sophistication. The percussions, horns, and the funky bass on some tracks like What Goes On. By then, the Archies became old Saturday morning news. With that, the Archies crashed and burned, at least until the recent revivals. But for so many pop acts to follow, this revival is telling us to stick with what you know and major at your own risk, even if you are metal curtain souls. はい、というわけで皆さんいかがだったでしょうか。The Archies の特集記事でした。正直ですね、動画を作っている私自身も聞き慣れない単語や言い回しがたくさんあって大変でした。アーチーズのこともよく知らなかったので、早速 Netflix でリバーデール見ています。このリバイバル版もですね、すごい今風でアメリカっぽくてとっても面白かったので、ぜひ皆さんも見てみてください。ちなみに BGM で使用している曲に歌をつけたカバーバージョンのシュガーシュガーのフルバージョンのリンクも概要欄に掲載しておりますので、 Apple Music や YouTube Music、Spotify などそちらのツールを使ってぜひ聴いてみてください。それではまた次のカルチャーでお会いしましょう。ご視聴ありがとうございました。よかったらいいねとチャンネル登録をお願いいたします。Thank you very much. See you next time.